We're joined by Mohammed Ali, a non-resident scholar of the Middle East Institute, and Trita Parsi, the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Trita, I want to begin with you, if I can. Let's talk about where the attack was and where the attack wasn't. Both Iran and the United States sending clear signals this past week that neither wanted to develop into full-scale war between these two countries.
Certainly, the attacks have been outside of Iran, but it is not clear yet whether it did target IRGC officials. It seems, based on the CENTCOM statement, that there was a targeting of IRGC, but it's not clear whether any IRGC officials were killed in these strikes. So while there is clearly a red line when it comes to targeting Iranian soil, it is still quite dangerous and escalatory if the president is going directly after IRGC officials. Now, of course, the Israelis have done this, and there's many in Iran who believe that Iran has not responded to those forcefully enough, and as a result, undermine its own deterrence. The U.S. may read into that, and as a result, believe that targeting IRGC officials outside of Iran is still not escalatory. Bottom line is, this is an extremely risky game that is being played, and if the attempt or the objective at the end of the day is to end these attacks against U.S. troops, there is a much more efficient way of achieving that, and that is through a ceasefire in Gaza.
Let's talk a bit about the Quds, the troops that really are the force that fights outside of Iran's borders, conducting operations as well as working with militias. Talk about that entity, how important it is, and clearly the United States believes that Iran, its fingerprints are all over what happened to the 3 U.S. troops who were killed last Sunday, as well as the 40 who were injured. Trita?
Oh, sorry, I thought it was for the other guests. No, of course. These attacks, these groups are without a doubt receiving support from the Iranians. Whether the Iranians are directly involved or green-lighting every attack or in that sense responsible for them is a different matter. And we've seen how the U.S. intelligence has come out and stated that they don't believe that the Iranians are in full control of these different groups. I think it's been quite clear over the course of the last 100 days that there are some significant divisions between Tehran and some of its partners here, in the sense that many of them are much more eager to be more aggressive and more targeting of the U.S. than what Tehran seems to have been. The clearest division is between the Houthis and Tehran on this. And it seems like the White House has recognized it's not just that it doesn't want to escalate, it also recognizes that since the Iranians are not in full control of these different groups, going after Iran would be an additional escalation since the basis is not as clear. Right. The administration nevertheless insists that because Iran is arming them, it is holding a degree of responsibility. But if that logic is to be accepted, that also means that the United States is quite responsible for what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, given the more than 10,000 tons of weapons that Biden has shipped to Israel since October 7th.
Mohammed, thank you for joining us as well. I'd like to get your response to that, the fact that if you really want to have this extension, you have to look at the United States, its relationship with Israel, the repeated call for ceasefire in Gaza. But clearly, the Biden administration has made it clear this past week, if you come after U.S. troops, if you kill U.S. troops, the United States is going to respond. How is this playing in certain areas of the Middle East?
Well, I mean, it's causing bloodshed for sure. I mean, it's and it's a sad situation. It's a scary situation at that. There is, obviously, I couldn't agree more that there is an absolute context within which this is unfolding. And it has the potential to slip. I mean, everyone's doing very calculative moves here, but still, the possibility of spin-off, of sort of things not going according to plan, are there. It's a risky, it's a dangerous, certainly a very sad situation, and I mean it's causing it's causing casualty.
Let's talk about the various countries who have reached out and really trying to find a path to a peaceful solution within the Middle East. We know China has repeatedly called for all sides to sit down, have some kind of ceasefire, return the hostages. China, perhaps as much as any nation on earth, has a lot at stake here. If you look at its shipping, how much it moves through the Red Sea, it's such a complex, intricate area that we are right now. Your thoughts on that, the move toward peace and trying to find some kind of way to stop the Houthis and others from initiating attacks within the Red Sea area?
So the earlier guest alluded to this as well, right? The fact that there are these, and being from Pakistan and having seen like the Afghanistan and that Cold War context growing up around that time, one realizes that things are not entirely, there's no puppet master here, but there's a lot of fluidity to these situations, and hence, I was using just
yeah.
trying to describe it in simpler words to myself. But there's a lot of moving parts here. And China is there. There's that, it's a careful balance between bigger power and, the more poisonous sort of proxy interactions and the collateral damage. That's the most distressing. And it's still unfolding. It's still risky, and the stakes are getting high. I mean, this is one example of the stakes getting slightly higher. Right. I mean, and this is how violence. That's the nature of violence. It's this tit for tat, at the granular level, which can become micro and then I mean, those dynamics kick in, the power and the jostling. So yeah, in that sense, scary too.
Trita, also the United States has made it clear that it's a multi-tiered attack. That perhaps we haven't seen the last of this. Are you concerned that there are yet other shoes that are going to drop?
Well, the administration has made it clear that this is not a one-off. They're going to be engaged in a sustained bombing campaign that can take several weeks, essentially in an open-ended bombing campaign. And the reason is because they're not really trying to deter these groups. They're trying to degrade their capability. That's going to take some time. That is also an extremely risky endeavor, because you can just imagine if the U.S. is bombing the region day after day after day for several weeks, the idea that there will not be any retaliation by these groups, that there won't be more Americans killed, is extremely unlikely. We've seen how this has played out with the Houthis. The president himself admitted it's not working, it's not deterring them. The hope is that over time it will degrade their capability. But again, I go back to what I said earlier on. There's a focus on degrading their capability, but not a focus on changing their incentives. If we actually went for a ceasefire in Gaza, they would change their incentives, and then it doesn't matter if they have the capability or not, they would not be attacking U.S. troops. It is perplexing, the extent, the lengths that Biden is going to avoid a ceasefire in Gaza.
Interesting. Mohammed, I'd like you to pick up on that, the lengths that he believes that Biden is going to avoid a ceasefire. The Biden administration has been to the area a number of times, sat down with Netanyahu, tried to get Netanyahu to agree to certain degrees of a ceasefire, but certainly making very little progress, especially the fact that the hostages are still being held. Where do you see this going, and are you concerned about a somewhat dramatic escalation in all of this?
Yeah, regional scholars have been pointing this out, right? And I mean, there's a long history to this kind of a position. Even during the Biden administration, the current Secretary of State and the President often, had, even within the earlier administration's posture, which was not great, but it wasn't putting a hard stop to what was unfolding vis-a-vis settlements and stuff. And it just seems that, this has been spiraling, and unfortunately, given the kind of government that was formed there, its own political sort of, survival stakes, and which is making it and it's then this kind of neo-conservative governance, like kind of hawkish stance towards this lingering, festering problem, this, the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. And of course, now it's not only going to happen here, these proxy outflares. I mean, they are occurring they're going to be occurring, unfortunately, in a messier way. And I mean, so this is and one hopes that there's going to be some peace in sight soon. I mean, it's in our face, but it's still ongoing.
Trita, one more question for you as well. If we listen to these proxy attacks that are going on, as I look at my notes, Iran-backed militia groups have launched 166 attacks on U.S. military installations since October 18th, 67 in Iraq, 98 in Syria, and of course the one in Jordan. I certainly understand the international concern that this could lead to an escalation within that region, but from a U.S. standpoint, do you see where the Biden administration is coming from, saying that it has to respond when its troops are killed?
Certainly, there is an understandable need, a political pressure for response, but the objective is not a response. The objective is to secure U.S. troops. And then raises the question, what's the most effective way of doing so? During the 6 days in which there was a ceasefire in Gaza, attacks by Iraqi militias and Syrian militias went down to zero. Not a single one occurred during that period. When the ceasefire was coming to an end, they issued a statement saying that if the ceasefire ends, they will also resume their attacks. So it's very clear, through a ceasefire, you can get this to stop entirely. The fact that we haven't been pushing for it and Biden has refused to use his extensive leverage to pressure Israel into a ceasefire means that we have accepted the risk that these attacks would continue, knowing quite well that at some point they may lead to the death of American soldiers, and now that has happened. And then the question is, well, shouldn't we respond? Well, if we actually prioritize securing U.S. troops in the first place, this would likely not have happened at all, and we would have been able to reach a much better solution, including, incidentally, the release of the hostages held by Hamas.
Mohammed, one final question for you. I've read a great deal recently about nations who are trying to foster peace talks within the region, not necessarily the ones who are the best friends with Israel or have good relations with Palestinians, but people who just see what is at stake. And getting back to China, how likely do you think it is that there is going to be progress, that all sides can sit down, led by some nation, to find a peaceful way forward through this, a return of the hostages, some kind of two-state solution, as well as a return to safety and security in the Red Sea region?
China didn't commit to Afghanistan. I think there was a desire by the globe, because that would have localized it, but so many mistakes had been made earlier, like in Bonn and elsewhere. I mean, I for instance, look at it from a anthropological human security lens.
Right.
For me, unfortunately, the way that power balances occur, it's like, it's after a while, it's strategic, like, the postures, the movement, because everything comes with an opportunity cost, and there are these. So I frankly don't have, a good sense here of how long we can tolerate. But then there's so many other deep wounds. Ukraine, stuff in South Sudan. Then I'm from the subcontinent, and I mean even what's been happening there. So it's these frictions and this and they have caused shock waves. There it's having its India's position is completely different to Pakistan's position right now, and historically that was not the case. And how that's unfolding, and then what that does internally to more vested agendas, it's creating this complex web, this tension. And it really needs to be resolved. And, some give and take needs to happen here, besides the loss of innocent lives.
Indeed, Muhammad Ali, it's a very sobering picture you paint there, a powder keg within the region and beyond. I want to thank both of our guests, Trita Parsi as well as Muhammad Ali. Thank you so much.